What do you think of when you see a cigarette? A harmless habit, a small pleasure, or a silent warning printed on its package? Maybe you've seen millions of images of it, in movies, at cafes, on the streets. But have you ever wondered, where did that cigarette begin? Who planted it? Who made it? And what do they think when they watch their product leave their hands? This morning, I stood in a field in North Carolina. The sun had just risen, casting its first light over rows of plants stretching like a green carpet. Not corn, not soybeans. These were tobacco plants. Thousands of them reaching upward through a thin veil of mist, silent yet proud. Mr. James Smith, 58 years old, walked me along the rows. He wore a faded striped shirt, the shoulders worn thin and shoes caked in red soil. "My family's been growing tobacco for 3 generations," he said, his voice slow, a mix of pride and quiet sorrow. "My father used to say, 'This plant feeds the whole town,' but he also forbade me from smoking it." I looked at him curious. "So, you've never smoked?" He smiled faintly. "No, I know it's harmful. But it's our livelihood. Without it, I wouldn't know how to feed my family." That contradiction, making a living from something you wouldn't dare touch, seemed like a thread running through the story I was about to share with you. In the distance, a cutting machine glided across the rows, slicing off the first flower buds. "We have to cut the flowers," Mr. Smith explained, "so all the nutrients go into the leaves." I watched each clean cut, each flower falling softly to the earth, lying there, silent. Beautiful, but fleeting. Above us, a flock of crows flew by, cawing loudly. And I wondered, how many generations of farmers had stood under this sky among these rows, cultivating something they both loved and feared? And how many of them had ever seen their product, rolled into a cigarette, burning halfway down in someone's hand, before vanishing into smoke? Back at the barn, Mr. Smith showed me massive drying racks. Inside, freshly harvested tobacco leaves hung, golden and fragrant. "It takes 6 to 8 weeks to cure them," he said. "It's a critical step. If you get it wrong, the whole season's ruined." I touched one of the hanging leaves, soft yet resilient. He looked at me, his gaze both proud and distant. "You know, sometimes I wonder, if I'd planted corn or rice instead, would I feel more at peace?" I didn't answer. Because in that moment, I realized, his story wasn't just about growing a plant. It was the story of an industry that feeds millions, yet also kills millions. A vicious cycle, not easily broken. Outside, the sun had risen high, warming the entire field. But inside me, a shadow had crept in. And this is only the beginning. We left the fields and climbed onto a truck loaded with freshly harvested tobacco leaves. The truck rolled down a dusty red road, heading toward a massive factory on the horizon. From afar, the factory rose like a giant beast of steel and glass, with towering smokestacks and wisps of steam drifting into the sky. As we passed through the steel gates, I heard the roar of machinery. A production line stretched hundreds of meters long, running steadily, rhythmically, without stopping for a second. The dried tobacco leaves were unloaded from the truck onto a conveyor belt, passed through a vibrating screen, and then fell into separate storage bins. Carlos, an operations engineer, walked me along the line. "We process hundreds of tons of leaves every day," he said, his voice nearly shouting over the machines. First, we sort them by size, color, quality. Leaves that are too dry get misted to soften them up. Damaged leaves are discarded. He pointed to a misting machine blowing a fine spray over the pile of leaves, making them supple again, like a magic trick. We moved on to the stem removal machine. This strips the midrib from the leaf, keeping only the lamina, Carlos explained. I watched the long, pale stems fall onto a separate belt to be repurposed as byproduct. The finer leaf parts flowed down into a large hopper, ready for the next step, blending. This is the secret sauce of every company. Carlos lowered his voice as if sharing a trade secret. The blending formula, how much Virginia, how much burley, how much Oriental determines the signature flavor. It's like a coffee blend recipe. A pungent, earthy smell began to fill the air. I saw a massive rotating drum spinning, filled with tobacco being cut and mixed inside. The steady click of blades echoed like the heartbeat of the entire factory. Cutting speeds 2,000 RPM, Carlos said. Every minute we process enough leaf for 10,000 cigarettes. I watched thin ribbons of tobacco spill onto the conveyor, forming a flowing stream of golden brown. We stepped into the rolling section. A giant roll of white paper, stretching over 7,000 meters, unspooled into the machine. A fine line of tobacco was evenly spread along the paper, then rolled tightly, pressed firm, forming a long, continuous tobacco rod. A high-speed cutter sliced the rod into short sticks, each to be fitted with a filter. This machine attaches the filters, Carlos pointed. It wraps a tipping paper around the filter, sealing it to the cigarette body. I watched completed cigarettes fall from the machine, neatly arranged on the conveyor belt, looking almost ready to smoke, except for the packaging. See this? Carlos looked at me, his eyes a mix of pride and quiet thought. Every minute we make 20,000 cigarettes, every hour over 1 million. But I've never pocketed one for myself. Inside this cold steel factory, I saw millions of tiny, identical cigarettes floating along the belts, like an endless river. At the end of the line, the cigarettes were grouped, wrapped in foil, packed into cartons stacked onto pallets, ready to be hauled away by trucks. Carlos watched a shipment leave the warehouse, exhaling a long sigh. Half will be exported to Asia, the other half sold domestically. Tonight, maybe a few million people will light a cigarette from this batch. Outside, the sun was at its peak, pouring harsh light through the glass windows. But inside the factory, the shadows of this giant machine kept moving silently. I left the main production line, following Carlos into another area, the quality control room. Here, the roar of the machines was gone. Only long wooden tables, harsh white fluorescent lights, and women sitting with heads bowed, carefully inspecting each cigarette. Maria, 42 years old, one of the longtime workers, greeted me with a gentle smile. My job is to inspect each batch, to check for defects, torn paper, loose filters, uneven filling. She held up a cigarette, turning it gently under the light. If I find a flaw, I pull it out. I check over 50,000 cigarettes a day. I looked at her hands, calloused with fingers faintly yellowed from years of handling tobacco. We passed through the automatic packaging area. Machines wrapped foil around each cigarette bundle, then in a blink, sealed them in outer film, printed labels, applied tax stamps. The machines released perfectly square, gleaming packs, identical to the ones you see on supermarket shelves. See this? Carlos said. We make a flawless product. No defects, no mistakes. Every pack exactly the same, inside and out. We walked to the carton section, where boxes stacked high like mountains. A forklift passed by, loading a full pallet, ready for the trucks. We stood by the warehouse doors. Outside, the first truck's engine rumbled to life, rolling out the gate, carrying millions of cigarettes into the world. When I left the factory, I made my way to an old library in the city, a place that archived posters and tobacco advertisements from across the decades. Vivid illustrations, bright colors, radiant faces. A lump rose in my throat. Just a few decades ago, people genuinely believed cigarettes were good for their health. It wasn't until the 1960s that the Surgeon General's report officially declared cigarettes cause lung cancer, heart disease, and dozens of other complications. After the stories at the hospital, I returned to the office of Mr. David Wilson, an agricultural economist specializing in the global tobacco supply chain. He spread out a world map, circling regions with a red pen. More than 125 countries grow tobacco. Over 40 million people depend on this industry, from farmers to factory workers, from truck drivers to shop clerks. In many poorer countries, he continued, tobacco is their main export crop. From Malawi, Zimbabwe, Indonesia, Brazil, they sell tobacco leaves to earn foreign currency. If they give up this crop, what else can they grow? I remembered Mr. Smith's question the other day. If I stop planting, how will I feed my family? A question now echoed from a small farm in North Carolina to these global maps. Tell me, David looked at me, if we banned tobacco tomorrow, how many families would lose their livelihoods? I stayed silent. That's the trap of this industry, he said slowly. We know it's harmful, but it feeds too many people. It creates jobs, income tax, excise tax. It ties the whole system together. He showed me a chart. Global tobacco revenue surpassing $800 billion a year. Tobacco taxes alone contribute billions to national budgets. In the US, teen smoking rates have dropped from 36% in 1997 to under 5% by 2021. Across Europe, many countries report record low smoking rates among young people. Public smoking bans, higher taxes, graphic warnings, they've all helped push cigarettes out of mainstream culture. I returned to Mr. Smith's fields at sunset. The sun burned red on the horizon, casting golden light over the rows of plants waiting for harvest. I left the field as night fell. I looked into the distance and saw a child running across the field, laughing, holding a branch high in the air. Not a cigarette, just a branch, harmless, innocent. A moment of hope, a different image, an ending or a beginning.